They flagged me before I ever sat down. Non-receptive, the intake form said, stamped in the corner with a little red glyph that meant defective in 6 different alphabets. My resonance implant had failed to bond during the crossing, some fault in the seating of the lattice against the inner ear, the medic told me, shrugging like it was a busted zipper. Everyone else on the transport had it taken root within a day. Mine just sat there, inert, a cold seed that never sprouted. At Sallow Hall, they didn't bother fixing it. They just moved me to the back row of the annex, the one with the dead acoustic paneling, and told me I'd be exempt from broadcast instruction until a replacement unit could be shipped from the home world. Estimated arrival, 11 months. I was 16, 4,000 light years from Lagos, and I'd just been told I was going to spend most of a year as the only deaf kid in a school where nobody spoke out loud. The other cadets didn't talk much either. That was the first thing I noticed. Sallow Hall ran on a single ambient frequency, the Vethrain called it, the hearth voice, and it lived in everyone's skull from the moment their implant took. Instructions, corrections, the Proctor's running commentary on your performance, all of it piped straight into the auditory nerve. No air, no sound, no mouths moving. A room of 40 students could sit through an hour of instruction, and you'd hear nothing but breathing and the occasional scrape of a stylus. I heard the breathing. I heard the scraping. And underneath all of it, faint, almost beneath notice, I heard myself think, uninterrupted, for the first time since I'd left Earth. The placement exam came on my 9th day. Standard cohort assessment, the kind every new arrival sat regardless of species. 300 questions, mathematics and Vethrani civic law, and the kind of spatial reasoning puzzles that looked like crossword grids drawn by someone with too many joints. I was given a paper copy, actual paper, because the Proctor's broadcast carried the questions, and I couldn't receive them. A junior instructor named Orveth Casal, narrow grey face, 4 eyes set in a vertical line, the kind of patience that read as boredom on a human, and probably wasn't handed me the packet like he was doing me a favor by not making me take it at all. You may find the questions difficult without context, he said. His voice came out flat, mechanical, the translator implant doing the heavy lifting. The broadcast provides supplementary framing for each item. You will not receive that framing. I'll manage, I said. He looked at me the way you'd look at a chair that had spoken. I worked through the math fast. It was math. The universe agrees on math, and got to the civic law section, which was duller, and then to the spatial puzzles, which were actually kind of fun, like the wooden peg games my grandfather used to keep on the porch. 40 minutes in, I looked up to stretch my neck, and that's when I noticed the room. 40 cadets, all writing, and every 90 seconds or so, in a wave that moved from the front of the room to the back like wine through grass, they'd all pause at the exact same moment, stylus lifted, eyes unfocused for half a second, and then resume, writing something slightly different than what they'd had a moment before. I watched it happen 4 times before I understood what I was looking at. It wasn't a glitch, it was a correction. The hearth voice was going into each cadet's head mid-test and adjusting their answer, not to the right one, I'd find out later, but to a specific wrong one, the same wrong one, cohort-wide, item by item. And because it arrived as a thought, indistinguishable from their own thought, none of them noticed it had happened. They'd just look down and find their hand had already crossed out a 7 and written a 4, and assume they'd change their mind. I had no implant. The wave passed through the room and broke against me like water against a post. I just kept writing. That's when I stopped taking the test and started taking notes. I flipped my exam packet over and used the blank backs to track it, which item numbers got corrected, how long after each cadet finished a section the wave arrived, whether it hit everyone or just some of them. It hit everyone. Every single time. And the corrections weren't random. On the math section, every corrected answer came out to a value about 11% lower than the actual correct one. On the civic law section, every corrected answer happened to match, almost exactly, the score band that the Veteran Combine's recruitment quotas listed as acceptable for support tier placement, a band I'd seen posted on a wall chart on my second day, back when I still thought it was just decor. 40 cadets. Every one of them quietly nudged, item by item, question by question, into a final score, just low enough to keep them out of command track, and just high enough to keep them from washing out. Not failures, not successes, exactly enough to stay useful, and never enough to be promoted past the people running the broadcast. I didn't feel angry, sitting there. That came later, at night, and even then, it was a slow, banked kind of anger. The kind you bank because it's more useful that way. What I felt at the time was the calm of a problem finally making sense. I'd spent 9 days wondering why a room full of clearly capable people kept landing, generation after generation according to the records I'd later pull, in the same narrow band of mediocrity. Now I knew. It wasn't them. It was never them. With about 20 minutes left on the clock, the proctor noticed me. I felt it. That was the strange part, feeling something meant for ears I didn't have, a pressure behind my eyes, brief, like a knuckle pressed hard against my temple from the inside. The hearth voice trying to reach in and adjust my paper the way it had adjusted everyone else's, and finding nothing to grab onto. It tried twice more in the next minute, each attempt a little stronger, a little more like a held breath. Casal's head snapped toward me. On the third attempt, he'd have heard it too, I realized later. An anomaly alarm broadcast straight into every implanted skull in the room, including his. 40 cadets looked up at the same moment. 40 pairs of eyes found me, the kid, in the dead acoustic seat, sitting very still, with a stylus in his hand and a stack of notes under his exam packet. Casal crossed the room. "You are receiving an anomaly flag," he said, and for the first time his flat translator voice had something underneath it, not anger, something closer to alarm. "The system indicates interference at your station." "No interference," I said. "I just finished early." I slid the exam packet toward him, finished test on top, and then turned it over and slid the back pages after it, my notes, item numbers in one column, the wave timing in the second, the corrected values in the third, and, at the bottom, in block letters, because I figured clarity mattered more than penmanship, the math on the 11% gap and what range it consistently produced. Casal didn't pick it up right away. He just looked at it. 4 eyes. Vertical. All 4 fixed on the same line of handwriting, and I watched something pass through his narrow gray face that I recognized, even though I'd never seen Navethrain do it before, the specific stillness of a person realizing that a question they'd never thought to ask had just been answered for them, and they weren't going to like where it led. 40 cadets sat in dead silence, the kind that exists when nobody's implant is saying anything at all. Because for once the hearth voice had nothing prepared for this. Casal picked up the pages. He read them once, fast, then again, slower, his stylus hand drifting up to touch the side of his own skull, just behind where I guessed his implant sat. "How long have you been recording this?" he said. It wasn't really a question. "About 40 minutes, I said. "I can keep going, if you want a bigger sample." He didn't answer that. He folded the pages once, carefully, like they were something that might tear, and walked toward the front of the room, without looking back at me, and as he walked, I watched the wave try to start again, that same ripple of pause and correct, beginning at the front row, and then watched it die halfway through, the way a current dies when something upstream gets pulled. Nobody told me what happened after that. Nobody tells the cadet in the back row anything. But 3 weeks later, a replacement implant arrived for me early, 6 months ahead of schedule, and the technician who installed it wouldn't meet my eyes, and the wall chart with the recruitment quota bands had been quietly taken down and was never put back up. I never did find out what my actual placement score would have been. I'm not sure anyone did by then. But I know what the rooms sounded like. The day the corrections stopped, 40 kids hearing their own thoughts arrive whole for the first time in their lives, and not one of them sure, at first, what to do with the silence.